Hey there, hope you're doing well. I'm sure you saw the news. Block announced yesterday, ticker symbol XYZ. They announced that they're going to let go of like 40% of their workforce. This is just the tip of the iceberg. It's been happening already. Amazon had some layoffs, I think more than once, I think maybe this year. And I think I've shared my thoughts on this more than once on our podcast, but I want to share something else here in this particular podcast. So as more people end up getting laid off, unfortunately, that's just going to be the scheme of things. I think, like it or not, as AI is able to do more of what each one of us is has generally been doing, and uh, as those models get better and better, it's just going to be the case that the companies are not going to need as many people, at least for the work that's being done currently. Of course, new roles should come into existence. We'll talk about that perhaps in another video. But given what's happening, I reckon there's going to be more people who are going to consider starting a business, right? Getting into entrepreneurship, things that you've been pushing away for years. You probably have, less of you might have less of an option just because of the way things are, and you might take concrete steps towards the goals that you've had in mind, or the dreams that you've had for a while. So in that context, as more people start to build companies, and particularly software companies, not everyone's going to be an engineering founder, right? I mean, there's going to be a good mix of people, a healthy mix of people who are engineering founders and business founders. Now, each has their own skill sets, and no skill set is more important than the other, right? That everything is just as important, but the way you approach the problem is going to obviously be different based on whether or not you are an engineering founder. Now, I am one, and I can speak to it from that perspective, and probably make some assumptions on what it might be if I were not to have been that person. There's a lot of other skills that I would have had that would have certainly helped us, but some of the skills I probably do have now, I wouldn't have had, and I would have had to find somebody else to help us build a lot of the software that we actually do build in house here at Snowpal. So if you are one of those people, right, a smart person who's got a good idea and knows how to execute on that idea, but is not necessarily an engineering founder, a year or two ago, maybe you had to hire somebody, right? Either raise money or bootstrap funded, or one way or the other. You had some money, and you had to hire some people, developers, to help you build it. That's not the case anymore. You can do it yourself, right? To a large extent. I've spoken to founders who've gone all the way up to production, not just proof of concepts, without having ever coded. It's possible with Claude doing a ton of the work, and other models like Codex and Claude and Vibe coding, and all of the code generation tools that are available out there are going to help immensely in taking in assisting a non-engineering founder to take the idea from initiation to production, right? That being said, there is still going to be, as I talk to more people, there are still going to be people who have a number of other things to do as they're running this company that they're getting started with, or perhaps have joined, that they would need a managed services firm to actually help them build software. So that's, we're 3 minutes in, but that's essentially the core topic of what I wanted to discuss in this particular podcast. If you are one of those people who's looking to actually hire a managed services firm and get stuff done, right? Get software built. Maybe you're building a mobile app, maybe you're trying to get a web app built, maybe you're building some backend systems, whatever it is. Maybe you're building something, maybe you're building a Slack app, or a plugin. Doesn't matter what it is, right? If you're trying to get something done and you've decided to actually find someone outside your company to either assist you in doing the software engineering work, or completely do it, right? Maybe you decided to delegate it because you probably may or may not have an IT or a product team, engineering team in house. If you happen to be in that bucket, then maybe the rest of this video is going to be relevant to you. If not, you're welcome to watch or listen, but maybe you have other better things to do. But if you happen to be one of those people, or you think you might be one of those people in the near future, I think maybe some of what I'm going to share here is going to help you. So let's get started, right? What are some things that you want to do, whether you're already doing it or you're not aware of it? I'm just going to, I don't know, so I'm just going to share a list of things in no particular order. um, One of the first things that you might do is, look to, let's say you have some money and you've decided you have an idea and you're trying to look for this team. One of the first things you might likely do is actually look for people to help you. And let's say if you have enough money, you're going to hopefully hire people in the US. But if you don't have the money that you do need, you're going to take the dollar is going to go further in other parts of the world. So you're probably going to go to South America, find some team, near-shoring team. They have some fantastic folks who build software in Brazil and Colombia and in other parts of South America, also in Mexico as well. But let's say you're going further to the east, you can go to Eastern Europe. There's some phenomenal engineers in like Prague that I've worked with, in Ukraine, and then South Asia and Southeast Asia. South Asia, obviously, India is a major hub. I happen to obviously come from there as well, like decades ago. But there's really smart people, right, who can help you build software. Now, so there is, you can choose where you want to go to find those people if you don't end up finding them here locally, which I'm sure is generally the first choice for a lot of us, for good reason. Now, if you end up going outside and then you rely on these platforms like Upwork or Freelancer, there's a number of these tools that let you hire these freelancers, and then you can assign work to them either independently. You find one person or two people, or you can find an agency and then you can assign them the whole project. But to do that, it takes a lot of that you need to do a number of things, because if you don't do the due diligence, um, you're going to find yourself in a position where you've spent a lot of money excuse me, and spent quite a bit of time as well, and then you have nothing to show for the time and money you've actually spent. I've talked to more than the number of people that I've liked to have spoken to, who've shared that with me and saying, Chris, you know what, we did this, we spent money, we found some teams or agencies, and they just didn't get stuff done. And it's sad to know that, but what can you do, right? I mean, and maybe that's why I'm recording this video, so hopefully it helps you. What are some of the things you have to look for? And there's some obvious and some not so obvious items. So things that are obvious to you here, please, humor me and maybe listen to that part as well, because I don't know what you know and what you don't. Um, the first thing is credibility. You're obviously going to look to see if that agency or the individual and how you approach the same problem, whether depending on whether you hire an agency or individual developers or engineers, is going to there's this quite a bit of differences between the two approaches. But let's say that let's assume that they are not that different. They are actually in reality, but let's assume for ease of conversation that they're not very different. You're going to look for credibility. Now, how you do it, there's n number of ways you can do it. Whether you like it or not, certain parts of the world, certain regions come with certain levels of default credibility. I mean, that is the truth. I wish I could say otherwise, but that's not true. So, depending on where you're going to look for work, you want to go do some research on what the average levels of credibility. Not to say that you don't want to stereotype and say one company did something good, bad, or ugly, then the rest of the companies in that part of the world are going to be similar. Obviously not. But that being said, I mean, there is a culture that each country has, obviously, and you have to make sure you understand that. And credibility is a core part of the culture as well, right? So some places, some parts of the world, you can find that just very easily. In other parts of the world, perhaps not so much. So you're going to have to accept that those differences, and be ready, be prepared to be able to tell the difference. So whatever your metrics are for credibility, make sure you define them, list them, and then make sure that that team or agency seems to be or has proven to be credible and reliable in the past. Maybe you found them through references, through their projects that you know for sure that they actually did. Because I've seen cases where these some providers have projects listed on their portfolio, but if you dig deeper, they may or may not have actually worked on it, or not to the extent that they claim to have. So you have to be careful with those types of things. The rates, when people go to Upwork.com or a site like that, you see you can hire a developer for $100 an hour or $10 an hour, right? There's a big range. I mean, this is pre-AI, and now, I mean, I don't know how it is now. It's probably just become wider, and the numbers are probably dropped as well. So while you might find, if you have a little bit of money, not a whole lot of money, you're going to be like, hey, you know what, I'm going to get the bang for the buck if I go with paying somebody $10 as opposed to $100 an hour, but you know what it means, right? I mean, you get what you pay for. Surely, it's just how life works. So while you don't need to pay the highest, you probably don't want to pay the lowest as well. Find out what the median rates are in that region, in that part of the world, and see what the median rates are for the type of work that you want to get done across, like, globally, and see if there's a mismatch. If there's too much of a mismatch, then maybe that's a red flag. The size of the team, how many people are you planning to hire? Are they all part of the same team, like the agency, or are you going to be hiring independent developers and or engineers or product managers or whatever the role is, that have nothing to do with each other? Now each one has its pros and cons. If you go to one agency, you have one person to deal with, or one group of people to deal with. You maybe have a project manager or somebody who's an interface to you, a client or an account manager. So if you have issues, you have, you can channel that to that particular individual or that sub team within that organization. So your engagement might be easier that way, right? There's more accountability, and you have less overhead and management work to do. On the flip side, if they don't do a good job, then you're in a dicey situation, right? Because you put all eggs in one basket. So going the other way is safer in that sense. You hire like five different people who make up your team. So you actually minimize your risk. It's almost like having a portfolio with five different securities and not just putting all your money on CoreWeave and waking up to a Friday morning like today where they plunged like 21%, right? And apologies for the digression. We are building a fintech API, so a lot of the conversation is going to finance is going to make its presence felt, I should say. Okay, back to what I was saying there. So if you hire different people from different companies or agencies or just individuals who are on those platforms, you have less of a risk that way, but you have more of a management overhead because you're going to have to manage each one of those individuals independently. And that becomes challenging because if something doesn't get done, there's going to be finger pointing where they're going to say, hey, that person didn't do it, or I was done in time but they didn't give me what I wanted. So you're going to have to sign up for managing those types of things. Now that's not easy, that's not pleasurable, but that's where you got to find out what makes the most sense to you. If you don't have any engineering background, maybe going to an agency perhaps is safer. But if you do have an engineering background, then maybe going the latter approach might actually work better for you. It might be more affordable, and it might minimize your risk, and so on and so forth. Now, we are a product company, right? We have many different products. One of the things we have are APIs that we publish on AWS Marketplace. So you can go check out Snowpile APIs. We got like 8 different APIs with thousands of endpoints, and that list keeps growing. So if you're building any system, no matter what you're building, you should be able to leverage, integrate our backend, our APIs, and along with the AI tools available today to go to market in quick time and reduce cost, reduce time to market, and reduce risk as well. And even if you're a managed services or a agency, you can use our products and that we've published. You can either license them, commercial licenses start at like $5,000, so it's very cheap, or you can use them pay by usage on AWS Marketplace, and then you can build it for your client, right? So that's a stack that might make more sense to you because you can do things really quickly, and we have products that are running on our APIs, obviously. So you have the credibility factor as well. Now, that I mentioned that for two reasons. One is it's a plug, sure. Two is you want to ask those companies, when you're talking to these people, the next item I want to talk about is the hiring or the interviewing process. But before I go there, let's talk about location. I think we talked about location, so I think we're good. Let's talk about the hiring, interviewing process. How are you going to onboard? How are you going to onboard those people? Now, there are a lot of tools and products out there that you can actually use on subscription that have these algorithms and tests that they give, and that gives you a rating. If you believe in those products, and more specifically in the way they actually interview candidates, I'm not a big proponent of that. uh, but again, to each our own. You can use them. Now sometimes, a lot of times actually, good candidates will get filtered out because they are not used to that process of being interviewed that way, or people get anxious or nervous when there's a live coding session, right? Just the way it works. And I've done a podcast on this as well as to how you could prepare for a live coding session and not worry about the three pairs of eyes looking at you. But it's not easy. It's easier said than done. So you want to figure out what the process is. Depending on the role that you're going to fill, that interviewing process is going to have to be different. Now, if it's developer, maybe the while the communication skills are going to be, it's important for anybody in any role working with just about anyone. But I think the magnitude, the degree of importance changes, right? If you're going to work with a development team with one person being the interface talking to you, the rest of the team doesn't speak the language or doesn't speak English just as well, maybe it doesn't bother you as much. It might bother me, but maybe it doesn't bother you just as much. Whereas if it's a product manager, or you're hiring a sales engineer, then surely it's very important how they present themselves, how they talk, how they articulate their ideas, and all of that matters. So how you interview, it's going to be, you probably already know that. And I don't know if it's going to have to be any different when it comes to hiring people on these platforms or hiring managed services teams. But you want to be careful, right? You want to be careful that it's I've heard all kinds of horror stories about somebody else giving it's a video call, video interview, but still they have AirPods, and there's some bizarre stuff happening where they are not the ones answering those questions, and all kinds of credibility issues. I mentioned credibility earlier. So if it's remote, if the person is not sitting in front of you, even if they are on video, make sure that they are who they say claim to be, and then the answers are coming from them. They're not, sure, they can rely on all of these AI tools. You see people keeping their phones and have just reading out what it says, but that's unethical, right? You can rely on these tools, but don't hide the fact that you are actually relying on those tools to answer those questions. And if you have to rely on those tools to answer every question, then why should you even get hired in the first place? Someone can they not use the tool themselves directly, right? Maybe a conversation for another day. So something, those are things to keep in mind. The hiring process, figure out what works for you, and then see if that makes sense and go forward with that. um, Turnaround times. Now, one of the ways that if you're doing remote work or hiring people on or agencies, whether it's on Upwork or freelancer, or even if it's within the nation, uh, people are going to bid, right? They're trying to go and lowball you, basically, right? Saying they're going to try to beat what they think the competition is going to charge. So in terms of cost and also the time, they're going to say, I'm going to get this done in half the time that someone else can do it at half the cost. That's great, right? That sounds awesome, but can they really do it? Because what happens is you get started on a project, they say it'll take 3 months, and then it takes 6 months and 9 months, and it never ever ends up being completed, or it's functional, and you spend a lot of money, you go over your budget. It comes down to how you plan to manage the cost and your spend, and what your burn rate is essentially. That's important, especially with managed services. Companies tend to promise a lot more than they can deliver, and it's up to you to figure out if what they're saying actually makes sense. And how do you create these, make it iterative, obviously, but make them really small. And especially with AI, you don't even need like 2 week sprints, possibly maybe you need 1 week sprints, right? Just to see how things can be done a whole lot quicker. Maybe not even a week, maybe every other day you have them do a demo of where they're going. Now, on one side, it's very good to keep it as narrow as possible because you feel like you're getting your money's worth. But on the other side, it's going to be quite inconvenient to even genuinely good engineering companies to have those turnaround times over long periods of time. No matter what people say, I don't think it's going, even with AI and all of the assistance you're getting, while you can get stuff done a lot sooner. Being able to demo comes with a lot of overheads, and being preparing for those demos does eat up a ton of time as an engineering team. So teams may or may not actually appreciate that. Okay, so that's turnaround times. Um, the merge and the merge, the actual SDLC, right? Ask them what their software development lifecycle actually looks like. It's changing. It's changed quite a bit from what it has been over the years. How much they obviously going to tell you that they are AI aware, because nobody can get hired if they claimed otherwise, whether or not they knew they used as many tools as possible. Just using chat GPT or Gemini is all right. Everybody does that. But how exactly are they planning to use these tools, AI tools, and what are the specific tools or models that they're intending to use, and what is their experience in having used those tools? That's something you surely want to understand. Let's take a step back. You want to make sure that the team that you're hiring is building software very differently from how they may have built the exact same thing like a year ago or 2 years ago, because things have changed dramatically, seismically. So if they have the same process and the same approach towards technology by virtue of muscle memory, then that's not a good thing. And maybe that's not the team you want to work with or the individual you want to work with. Ask them what the tools they're going to use, what AI, specifically AI tools, and why they've chosen to use, why they would choose to use those tools in lieu of something else, and what are some other options that there are that might be available that they actually think is not good or good enough to be used in the case of your project, for instance. Those are very specific questions you want to be able to ask them, and make sure they have good answers as well. And those answers don't happen to come from chat gpt, right? That's something you have to do for all of these points that I list here. The merge process, once they do create the code, how do you merge them? Now, again, a lot of people are going to be generating a lot of the code, like 70 to 80% of the code as we speak today, which is good, right? So if the machine wrote that code, then you have less to worry about. But if you cannot tell what was generated by a lot of the tools that they've used, like what did Claude uh, generate versus what did the team actually write? You need to be able to tell the difference so you can review what the team actually wrote. I mean, you're going to review the user interface, if it's a web app or a mobile app, but what if it's all backend, right? What are you going to be looking at as a non-engineering founder? So you're going to have to be able to take the part of the code that they wrote that was not generated, and be able to tell the difference between code that was and wasn't generated, and keep a closer eye on that part of the code. Because how do you know how good the code is? And how, because you're the one who's going to maintain it. We'll come to maintenance shortly, but you're the one who's going to have to take ownership, because that's your code, right? It's your baby. So don't just take it. It's not a college project. Just because something works doesn't mean that's good enough. That doesn't mean it's production ready. But your objective might well be just to raise money, or just attract some initial customers, just to get more feedback and see if there's traction. Then it's all right. Maybe the quality of the code perhaps does not matter, because if you do find traction, which is not easy, right? It's easier said than done. Or if you do find product market fit, or when you do find it, then you might go back and rewrite the whole thing, which is a completely fine approach. But if that's not to be the case, and if you're spending your personal dollars that you've earned and saved, you may or may not want to waste, quote unquote, that money and the time as well. The time is more important than the money, obviously. So you want to be careful. You want to understand how you're going to do the merging. And if you don't understand code, you might need somebody locally, even if 95% of the work is done at a cheaper cost outside the borders, because you don't have the money to hire people locally, and you're doing this remotely, and there are teams working in different parts of the world. You want to make sure that there's somebody who vets that code, and that's certainly not part of that same team or agency. So you can tell the quality of those deliverables, and if they're not good, you can reject it and tell them that, hey, you got to do better. um, and again, the next item is time and materials versus fixed price. Each one has its own pros and cons. Time and materials is, they're going to charge you for every hour, every week they work, every day they work. So managed services teams can stretch that. What might start out as a 3-month project can become 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months, like twice the amount of time you expected for it to take. So your cost doubles there. So time and materials has that issue. Fixed price on the other side, you're going to have to write it to the last detail. You have to document your requirements to the T, because if it's not said there, they're going to tell you that, hey, I cannot do this because you didn't ask for that button to be there, or you didn't ask for two buttons, you asked for one of them, as a simple silly example. So each one has its pros and cons. I mean, I fixed price gives me jitters, because you both parties have to be extremely careful about what is in the contract from a verbiage standpoint. Otherwise there's going to be issues. Time and materials is easier that way, but again, the client runs a risk of having that be stretched out. With fixed price, more of the risk is on the vendor, because if the client actually either truly believes they wanted something but they didn't put that in words in the document, then who's responsible for that, right? Next is who maintains whatever they build. Let's say they built everything, they gave it to you, things worked all right. You go past your low, beta, alpha, alpha, beta, and then you go live, lower environments, and then to production. Who maintains this after you go live? Is it going to be the same team or the same group of people? But again, if you hire people locally, managed services, that's you have more control, to some extent at least, over proceedings. But if you found people on these outsourcing freelancing platforms, then they might have found some other gig, and they're not available anymore. I mean, are you going to have a retained what is it they call it, the retained I forget the term, right? Retainer contract, where they're going to assist you even after the project's been delivered, but they're not available full time. But then, what if you have a production issue during the day or during your peak hours? Who's going to be able to help you fix it because you happen to not be this engineering founder? But now again, with all this being said, even being a non-engineering founder is this is a great time to be that person, because there are tools that will do a ton for you, and you can actually be educated on the go as you build the software. Not something that was possible a year or two ago, certainly not 3 4 years ago. So you've got a lot more help, so that's good. But that being said, I've not talked to anybody who's a non-engineering founder who's never written code who actually has told me that, Krish, I don't even need one person to vet what's happening or to give me confidence, right? That's not been the case. So you do need that person that you actually do trust, even if they don't do the whole work, but there's somebody who's actually looking, overseeing proceedings, even on a part-time basis, but somebody who's local to your region or to your nation, essentially. um, if they're not going to be the ones maintaining it after launch, what are your plans? Who are you expecting to engage to maintain it? Because that team would not have built the original product. So the stack is something that they need to get themselves acclimated to, and that's going to take time. And they're going to say, hey, this doesn't look right, that doesn't look right, because the person who's not in the team is usually the one to blame. Just how it goes, right? So you have to make sure you have some clarity there. And then the choice of technologies, right? The tech stack. If a team is picking something, even if it's their job to pick it and build it and showcase it to you, you've got to have some idea as to what they're picking and why they are picking whatever it is that they're picking. Whether it's a database, whether it's SQL, NoSQL, vector database, right? Which vector database are they picking? You have to understand what a vector database is to some extent, so you know why they may have chosen that or why they did not choose that. And what is the architecture looking like? What, first, the tech stack is one, but it's closely tied to the architecture as well, right? I mean, it can be, it doesn't have to be, but let's keep it simple. You got to believe that those technologies are current. There's popularity in the part of the world, at least where you live in, and or hopefully across the globe. So they don't end up picking something that's actually very specific to their region. And there are technologies and tools that are popular in some parts of the world and not other parts of the world, or some that have actually lost traction in one part of the world, but still those data technologies do continue to exist and be used in some other region. So you've got to be careful. What are they picking? Why are they picking? And why not something else? Are things that you want to understand. If not, you're going to be in a bit of a soup, because you get this offering and then you can find other help to help you support that, essentially. So that's important. The next thing I want to ask them is this their primary project, especially if they're independent developers, even if they're agencies, because the agency could have a team. They have a number of people, but those people who work on your project for a few months might just leave and move to something else, because sometimes they have these star performers, quote unquote, who engage with the client just in the initial weeks or a month, and then they're gone, and you end up giving them the project because you were impressed by that person or those that set of people, but they're not working on your project anymore, and it's no good, right? You feel deceived, and right, you might feel deceived, and rightfully so. So you have to understand what the team is, if it's an agency, who those individuals are, what their names are, and if they are the ones going to be engaged during the entire course of the project. And you need to have interviewed each and every one of them, theoretically, right? Hopefully you're able to do that, unless you trust the agency enough to trust the main point of contact, and then you're all right. So if it's not, if it's individuals, you want to ask if this is a primary project, because on all of these platforms people do a ton of part-time work. They sometimes pick up like 4 different gigs, and then you may not be their primary client or even the secondary client, so they don't give you enough importance. So I never ever work with anybody who doesn't, if we end up giving the work to somebody to assist us, if Snowpal's work is not their primary project, right? That's a definite no for us. um, what else? Legal issues. If the contract, if they don't deliver on time, what happens? Sure, you can have everything that you like written on a contract, so legally you can perhaps go after them, or vice versa. But what if they're not in the same country, right? What the laws of your land don't apply or are not applicable? Do you even understand the laws of that land where they are based out of? And do you think it's feasible to go chase them down in 10,000 miles away? Trust me, it's not just difficult, it's impossible. So you're going to have to find ways to protect yourself, not just by the legality of the contracts, but beyond the legal verbages, however you end up doing that. So these are some of the things that I can think of. I'm sure there's more that I've forgotten here, but at least if you did this, actually, there's one more thing. Once things are working, you need to understand every dependency that the product the your application has. Where is it being deployed? Is it being run on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or one of the other neo clouds? A lot of the other ones that have come popped up now, and they're pretty good actually. If so, is it your login? You certainly don't want to use their login, right? It's your subscriptions, your login, your payments. You have admin access, and the team that you assign to does not have admin access. They just have the least access that they actually do need. That way, if you know what's happening, and you have complete control over proceedings. And make sure that once they tell you all the dependencies, and you've created all of these logins and subscriptions and whatnot on all of these different platforms, when you are not when you've gone live obviously, but when you're even before you've gone to the lower environments, even when you're running things locally on your machine, you want to make sure you gotten that running on your machine. I mean, that's a given. Doesn't matter if you're a technical founder or a non-technical founder, somebody in your team, in your core team, not the outsource team, but the core team, needs to have this running locally. And all of those dependencies that we have mentioned earlier, turn each and every one of them off, or one of them off, and see if hell breaks loose, because it should. And if you took all of them down, your system comes to a screeching halt locally, obviously, and then you power each one of them back on. I say power literally, but you know what I mean. Bring those systems back online and see if you're able to, have you need a deterministic approach, essentially, meaning every time you do that, the outcome should essentially be exactly the same. If that's not the case, then there are some gaps, and that's not good. You need to find out where those gaps are and fill them from an understanding and documentation standpoint, right? So hopefully, some of this is maybe hopefully all of this is helpful to you. But even if you knew some of this, maybe there were things here that you perhaps necessarily did not think of as a non-engineering founder. And if that's the case, and if some of this helped you, the pleasure is mine. Before I end, definitely go to products.snowpal.com to check out our suite of products. Use our API, so don't waste time and more money, and don't assume more risk than necessary to build your software. But all the AI tools that are available, in conjunction with our APIs, you can build stuff in real quick time. And we're also working on a model context MCP server. And once we have that available, you can use your agents to consume services as well. But that's in the coming. But till then, it's a traditional way of integrating APIs, but it's very simple. You go to AWS Marketplace, within 3 minutes, you'll get the key, and you should be good to go. And it's usage-based pricing. We also support other engagement models. So you can create a private offer. If we can create private offers on AWS Marketplace if you want. If you want a slightly different way to engage with us, we'll be more than happy to do that. Until next time, thank you.